Hello again to another Agakala reaction. Today we will be watching another part of the Historian Battles playlist from Kings and Generals, and this one is titled Second Battle of Kosovo 1448 Hunyadi versus Murad. And let's just jump into it and watch. Obviously, I don't know what I was trying to say there. Well, obviously it just came out from my head.
During an uneventful autumn evening in the year 1448, John Hunyadi marched his mighty Crusader host through the Kosovo field on his way south to unite with Skanderbeg and his Albanians. The soil he and his army now stood upon had been the site of a great and bloody struggle between a Serbian prince and an Ottoman sultan almost 6 decades prior. Unbeknownst to the Crusaders, they were about to take part in the sequel to the epic 1389 battle. The Second Battle of Kosovo was just over the horizon, and once more the future of the Balkans teetered on the precipice. This week, our YouTube members and patrons will continue watching our series on the North African campaign during World War II, as we cover Operation Crusader, during which Rommel faced the Allies once again. The support of our YouTube members and patrons allows us to continue releasing these free videos without worrying about unstable YouTube ad revenue and lets us be more choosy in terms of our sponsors. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and get access to 2 weekly exclusive videos, more than 150 right now, including the series on the Pacific War, Fall of Sparta, First and Second Punic War, Russian Revolutions and the Civil War, Italian Reunification Wars, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Iberian Reconquista, the World War II North African Campaign, the Persian Wars, and much more. Thanks for your kind support. With Sultan Murad II back on the throne after his retirement was cut short, Ottoman armies made preparations to strike deep into Europe once again, after 2 years of relative idleness. Back during the Varna Crusade of 1444, the Byzantines, under despot Constantine of Morea, had taken advantage of Edirne's preoccupation against Hunyadi by conducting a series of military operations in southern Greece. After refortifying the Hexamilian Wall, the ambitious despot launched what was to be one of the last major military offensives in Roman history. Within a single year, his armies conquered the region of Boeotia from the Latin Duchy of Athens, thus forcing its ruler into vassalage. On top of that, Constantine and his recently hired Albanian and Vlach mercenaries proceeded to conduct a significant raid into Ottoman-held Thessaly. With Turkish armies preoccupied in Albania during the years after Varna, the Romans were left unpunished for their military transgressions until Murad II's reascension in 1446. One of the Sultan's first decisions after coming back to power was to launch a retaliatory campaign against Morea during the winter of 1446. Hearing the news of an incoming invasion, the 2 despots of Morea, Constantine and Thomas, decided to make their stand against the Sultan on the recently refortified Hexamilian walls. However, once Murad and his grand host arrived at their gates, a precursor of future events to come was to take place. For 5 days, Ottoman artillery bombarded the Byzantine walls with great intensity, leaving a trail of destruction and smoke. As the Hexamilian walls were reduced to rubble, Murad led his armies through the fortifications' breaches into Morea. What followed was an indiscriminate mass sacking and looting of the entire region that saw many Romans taken captive and sold into slavery in Anatolia. Constantine and Thomas could do little to stop the situation, and were forced to take refuge in their fortress capital of Mistras. Seeing no other way of halting the Ottoman war machine, the pair bowed down to Edirne's vassalship once more. Next on Murad's agenda was the ongoing Albanian revolt. In the years after his great victory at Tovyol, Skanderbeg had made new enemies in the form of the Italian merchant republic of Venice. The Albanian lord had entered into a series of land disputes with the merchant republic over the fortress of Dagnum and its surrounding Adriatic coastal settlements, thus sparking a war in the year 1447. With the Venetian Doge putting a bounty on Skanderbeg's head, the stage was set for another Ottoman military campaign into Albania. By the late spring of 1448, Murad and his son Mehmed readied a large host of around 50,000 strong and marched on the border fortress of Svetigrad. Capturing the fort would give Edirne a foothold in the local region, where it could conduct future military operations against the rebels. Upon hearing of the massive invasion, Skanderbeg began employing guerrilla and scorched earth tactics to stall the invaders, while he prepared his fortress towns for the upcoming war. Regardless, the Albanian lord's tactics proved less effective this time around, as he now faced a far greater and more experienced Turkish host. By mid-May, Murad's army had besieged Svetigrad and began bombarding its walls, to much Albanian resistance. The bloody 2-month siege only ended after the defending garrison's water supply was sabotaged, resulting in their surrender. The siege was to be the first Ottoman victory in the region since the start of the rebellion 5 years prior. But upon capturing and garrisoning Svetigrad, news in the shape of a new crusade had reached the Sultan's camp.
Okay, so far I'm kind of confused. I can't really remember what happened in the previous one. There was a Skanderbeg, isn't there? So they were just explaining how Skanderbeg got into the power and what he was doing, things like that. So they kind of had to introduce him to be able to explain what's happening here and what's the importance of his persona. But yeah, it just I don't really have nothing else to add, because so far I'm just watching and looking at the fact that Murad is going with 50,000 people, and it's in Greece as well. I don't know, did they jumped a lot? Or do I just really forgot about it from 2 weeks ago? Because I did record 2 weeks ago for that, so you know. So yeah, I shall see you in a second then. Alright, I'm back, and let's just jump into it, because honestly I'm still kind of confused what is exactly going on in here. I mean, they go into Albania to fight with Skanderbeg, but I just don't know. But this is 2 years before the actual Battle of Kosovo.
Back during the summer of 1447, Buda's war with King Frederick III over the young Ladislaus V had ended in a stalemate that ensured the status quo between the two sides would be retained. Immediately after the cessation of hostilities, John Hunyadi began preparing to form yet another crusade against the Ottoman Sultanate. But this time around, less international help came to the aid of Hungary, which was once again the main sponsor of the crusade. Unlike the
and that was, I remember, because I was editing and I said like, oh, I don't know if that was Polish-Lithuanian. You can see clearly here that it's not Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth yet. And obviously I have my dates really off. But there's Poland and there's Lithuania here. So, yes. So that just in regards of my last week comments about that.
On the Crusade of 1444, the naval forces of Venice would not be present this time around, as the Doge had signed a peace treaty with the Donau in 1446. Pledged help from Aragon and Naples also failed to materialize, leading to the Hungarian regent writing a letter to Pope Nicholas V stating that he had been severely misled by the fruitless promises of Western Catholic powers. However, despite the West's paltry offerings, an official crusading bull was proclaimed in Rome against the Ottomans by April 1448. This time around, no foolhardy Polish monarch could thwart Hunyadi from achieving his ultimate goal of pushing the Turks out of Europe. Having mustered his army throughout the summer, the Hungarian regent crossed the Danube into Serbia during the first weeks of fall. This time around, the Crusader army aimed to unite their forces with Skanderbeg down south before marching on Thessalonica and then to Edirne itself. Hunyadi's host numbered around 22,000 strong, comprising 5,000 Polish infantry and cavalry, 3,000 Moldavian cavalry led by Peter III, 4,000...
I'm kind of curious now. I have to check that, because obviously I don't remember my kings. And the years especially. I remember some of them. I remember that in primary school I did have to learn all of the... kings in order and the years of their reign. 48, isn't it? So the king of Poland was Kazimierz IV Jagiellończyk, and he became king in 1440. That's not right. Oh no, sorry. This is here. I have to change the language though. Okay. So, he was the king of Poland from 1447 to 1492. And English name Casimir IV Jagiellon. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Yep, that makes sense. Alright, and back to the actual reaction video, so there you go.
Wallachian infantry and archers led by Vladislav II, 8,000 cavalry from Hungary and Transylvania, 2,000 Czech mercenaries crewing war wagons, and a few thousand infantry from Germany and Bohemia. Juraj Branković of Serbia was also invited to join the crusade, but the despot had declined, citing that he was already militarily preoccupied with fighting Bosnia for control over Zeta and Srebrenica. But in reality, the Serbian despot did not want to risk the fragile peace between him and his son-in-law Murad II. As a result, Juraj chose to stay neutral in the upcoming conflict, as he—
Okay, I kinda have to start paying attention to those little notes here on the side. No, we're gonna have to do it. So basically, Murad II married Juraj Branković's daughter Mara in 1435. She played a key diplomatic role in the European affairs of Edirne, notably contributing to the signing of the 1444 Treaty of Szeged. Okay, I understand why.
had also done 4 years prior during the Varna Crusade. Due to Juraj's intransigence, Hunyadi gave his men free license to pillage and burn the Serbian countryside during their march south. However, the decision to do so was to be a colossal blunder and oversight by the Hungarian regent. This act of brutality against his countrymen infuriated the Serbian despot so much that he began to pass on intelligence to the Ottoman Sultan on the whereabouts and size of the Crusader host. Possibly even more critical to Edirne's war effort, he also began blocking the southern mountain passes of his realm to prevent Skanderbeg and his Albanian contingent from uniting with the main Crusader host.
It looks like a big mistake.
By late September, the Crusader army had captured Niš, the site where Hunyadi had won 3 decisive battles back in 1443. Knowing nothing about the Turkish army's whereabouts, the Hungarian regent assumed that Murad was still mustering his troops in far-off Edirne or Plovdiv, which had been his standard base of operations in the Balkans. However, the Sultan of the Ottomans had been very active in the 2 months after his victory at Svetigrad. Upon hearing of Hunyadi's intentions to invade his realm, Murad abandoned his campaign in Albania to concentrate his forces at Sofia before the advent of war. By the time Hunyadi had entered Serbia, the Sultan was already on the move, marching his army westward, guided by Juraj's intelligence. Murad also took advantage of Vladislav II's absence from Wallachia to bring the country back into the Ottoman fold. Having released the teenage Vlad from his captivity at Edirne and arming him with an army, the young Wallachian royal had managed to seize his late father's former throne by October. Crowning himself as Vlad III, the new Wallachian voivode submitted his country to Ottoman vassalage once more, before handing over the towns of Gurju, Rusay and Tutrakan back to Turkish authorities. All of these outside actions were unknown to the Crusader host during their march south toward Albania. By October 15th, Hunyadi's army entered the Kosovo field northwest of Pristina. The location had been the site of the infamous clash between Sultan Murad I and Prince Lazar Hrebeljanović back in 1389. On the nearby Plementina Hill lay the slain Sultan's tomb, which was built during the reign of his son Bayezid I. In the coming days, the leaders of the—
Okay, so Murad I was initially buried on the Kosovo field where he died. However, his body was soon moved to the capital Bursa while his internal organs were kept in the original tomb, resulting in Murad I having 2 tombs. Okay.
The Crusader host identified the tomb while making camp near the Lab River to its immediate north. Like many in Christendom, Hunyadi knew about the infamous engagement which had occurred 60 years before his time, and took the lives of 2 monarchs and thousands of their followers. However, what he didn't expect was to see another Sultan Murad arriving on the field of Kosovo from his rear 2 days later. The shocked Crusader host could have continued their march southwards in the hope of uniting with the Albanians, but such a decision would have removed the army further from Hungary, rendering a potential retreat extremely difficult. In a single surprise move, the Ottoman Sultan had blocked his foes' northern escape, thus forcing them to make battle. Unbeknownst to Hunyadi and his men, they were about to take part in the sequel to the 1389 clash. The Second Battle of Kosovo had just begun.
So Second Battle of Kosovo. Okay, so 60 years. I'm just gonna be following up because honestly, I don't really have much to add because I don't have information. I mean, whatever you just see now, that's the information that I have. Obviously, there's gonna be big fight again. Didn't he said there was 22,000 from John Hunyadi, and then 50,000 from Murad, isn't it? Oh, I was supposed to play the ad, by the way. And here we go. So, yeah, so I can't really add much information to it, and I kinda need something to drink, so I will just be back in a moment. Bye. Alright, I'm back with the coffee, and we can continue. There you go.
Day of battle saw the advanced guards of both armies skirmishing for control over Plementina Hill, an advantageous slope on the plain that could decide the fate of the engagement in the days to come. Luckily for the unprepared Hunyadi, his hussars had managed to quickly drive the Ottoman Akinjis off the slope, thus allowing the Hungarian regent to set up his defences, namely his war wagons, on top of the hill. However, this came at the cost of—
I'm kinda confused about why the Hunyadi had so much of Polish troops in there. Hussars and all? Well, it's gonna work.
of conceding his access to fresh drinking water from the rivers Lab and Sednitsa to the Turks. The second day of battle saw Murad I and his son Shahzada Mehmed form up their host of 40,000 to engage with the Crusader host of around 22,000. Two members of the House of Osman commanded the centre, alongside the heavy Kapakulu Sapahi cavalry, elite Janissary infantry, and a small unit of artillery. The Ottoman centre also employed the same type of war wagons famously used by the Hungarian regent in the form of the newly created military corps called the Artillery Wagoners. Meanwhile, the Anatolian Tamali Sapahis formed the right wing, while the Balkan Tamali Sapahis formed the left wing. Light Akinjis flanked both wings, while the vanguard of the entire army was made up of light Azab infantry armed with maces, bows and axes. From their advantageous slope, the Hungarian army also formed up for battle. Hunyadi commanded the centre, along with the main corps of his infantry and cavalry from Poland, Germany, Bohemia and Transylvania. The Moldavian and Wallachian contingent mainly made up the left wing, while cavalry from Hungary were present in both wings.
I just realized my question was kind of silly because I just realized that basically that was a crusade, and crusades usually are multinational, isn't it? Silly me.
Lastly, Czech mercenaries crewed the war wagons on top of the hill, protecting the rear of the entire army. Hunyadi's battle plan was to engage the Ottoman wings with relatively less numerous forces as a means to break his foe's centre with a massive cavalry charge. The lesson the Hungarian regent learned from his defeat at Varna was that while the Tamali Sepahis were relatively easy to dislocate and rout, success on the wings was not enough to break the Ottomans. The battle had to be won in the middle, and thus Hunyadi stationed his best troops accordingly. The battle began with a general charge of both Hungarian wings into the ranks of Anatolian and Balkan Tamali Sepahis. After some bloody fighting, both the Ottoman left and right began being pushed back to their camp. Seeing the tide turn in his favour, Hunyadi launched his main assault on the Ottoman centre with the bulk of his core troops. While arrows and cannon fire rained upon the Crusaders, the Janissaries from the reserve centre moved to the flanks, thus opening a gap in the Ottoman centre. This move allowed the Crusaders to rush until they were blocked by the fortified Turkish war wagons in the rear of the army, which conversely allowed the Janissaries to strike at their flanks from both sides. Many Hungarian barons and other Crusader leaders were killed in the mayhem. Seeing that his assault on the Ottoman centre had failed disastrously, Hunyadi ordered his army to make camp for the night. Knowing the battle had been lost, the cavalry contingent of the Crusader army, including Hunyadi himself, fled the battlefield under the cover of darkness. Like at Varna, the Crusader infantry was left behind at the mercy of the Ottomans. Throughout the night, Murad ordered assaults upon Plementina Hill, but the immense firepower of the Czech war wagons halted all such attempts to take the slope. Only by sunrise on the third day of the battle were the Janissaries successful in breaching the exhausted Crusader defences. According to Western sources, the remaining Crusaders all perished to the last man during the final assault. The Second Battle of Kosovo had ended just like the first battle, in an Ottoman victory. The decisive victory at Kosovo was yet another triumph for Murad II, as the Sultan again repelled a Crusader invasion from his lands.
So according to Ottoman sources, Skanderbeg also reached the battlefield during the Battle of Kosovo. However, seeing that the battle was already lost, he withdrew without engaging. Okay.
For a third time. The battle proved once and for all that Turkish battle tactics of repeated deflection, retreat and rearrangement outclassed the brute strength of heavily armoured European cavalry. In the aftermath of the bloody fighting, many Crusader leaders were captured while escaping the battlefield, and were thus later individually ransomed off by the Ottoman Sultan in the coming months. Hunyadi himself had also been captured during his northern retreat back to Hungary by none other than a revenge-seeking Juraj Branković. The Serbian despot had demanded justice for the mistreatment of his countrymen at the hands of the ravaging Crusader army at the start of the war. Justice was finally served a few months later when the Crusader leader was ransomed off to Buda for the grand sum of 100,000 gold florins. Broken and humiliated, John Hunyadi would never again go on the offensive against the Ottomans, thus fielding a more defensive posture against Edirne in the following years. With the Crusader army decisively defeated, Sultan Murad II now turned his gaze to Albania and Wallachia. In the
Okay, so basically, the crusade went on again, and they lost again. Because obviously, they were nearly double with the power. I mean, the Murad had 40,000 and they had 22,000. So it's almost like 2-1, isn't it? Almost. So I'm not that surprised that they kind of lost. But you never know. Sorry, that was a weird ad. So basically, yeah. I have nothing else to add. I'm not that big into battles and following. It is in the part of the playlist, so I am going to watch it, obviously. But I'm not that knowledgeable to actually comment on it. What was good, what was bad. Well, someone lost, someone won. People lost lives. So, yeah. That's what happens when you fight in wars, isn't it? And unfortunately, that's still happening. So, yep. And we're back. So, we can keep going. Where are we?
In the wake of his retreat from Kosovo, Vladislav II rushed back to his domains and defeated the newly installed Ottoman-aligned Vlad III in a short civil war. However, this act of open defiance was not lost on the Sultan of Edirne. In retaliation, a large-scale Ottoman raid was conducted on Wallachia during 1449 that saw many of its lands being pillaged and many of its people carried off to slavery. Although Vladislav survived the onslaught and remained a Hungarian vassal, much of his country was left in ruins. With Wallachia removed from the picture for the time being, the issue of the raging Albanian revolt became the centerpiece of Murad's military efforts for the next 2 years. Although failing to lift Murad's siege of Svetograd, Skanderbeg had, in the meantime, defeated a Venetian and an Ottoman army at the battles of the river Drim and Oranik during the summer of 1448. The two battles combined resulted in over 5,000 casualties for Venice and Edirne, and saw the former sign a peace with the Albanian lord by the end of 1448.
So, with the 1448 treaty, Venice agreed to pay Skanderbeg 1,400 ducats annually to retain their hold on Dagnum, the very cause of their late conflict. Dagnum? Oh, over there, okay.
Regardless, the Ottomans persisted in their goal of crushing the rebellion, and so continued their war with the League of Legia. By early 1450, another major confrontation between Murad and Skanderbeg had become ever so inevitable as the Albanian fortress of Berat.
So, taking advantage of the fortress's ill defense due to an ongoing change of command, with its lord on his deathbed, Ottoman forces from Gjirokastar managed to scale the walls of Berat in a surprise night raid. Wow. Okay.
Fell to a surprise Turkish night raid. Mustering between 20 and 40,000 troops for his new Albanian campaign, the Ottoman Sultan chose to strike at Kruja, the rebellion's main base of operations. As the Turkish army began its march westward during the spring of 1450, Skanderbeg prepared his own armies and fortresses in the local region for the upcoming war. His men once again adopted a scorched earth policy all along the Ottoman invasion route, as hundreds of fields and farms were burned. All along their march to Kruja, the Turkish army was ambushed by local bands of Albanian peasants on numerous occasions. Night raids were conducted, roads were blocked, and wells were poisoned. Nevertheless, by May 14th, Murad and his son Mehmed had arrived at the gates of the Albanian fortress and began its siege. Kruja's garrison was around 2,000 strong, and led by a man named Vrana Conti. Its soldiers were made up of various Albanians and Slavs, in addition to smaller contingents from Western Europe. Meanwhile, Skanderbeg himself commanded a force of 8,000 outside the fortress walls, 3/4 of which were light hit-and-run cavalry.
That's 20 to 40,000.
Outnumbering his foe by a considerable
10,000.
margin, Murad sent messengers to Kruja and offered its defenders favourable terms of surrender and lavish bribes, but to no avail. What followed was a significant bombardment of the fortress's walls by the newly standardized Ottoman artillery corps. After 5 days of continuous barrage, a substantial breach was opened, resulting in the Sultan ordering his troops to advance through the walls of Kruja. Regardless, the fortress's defenders filled the breach, and the invading assault was repelled. During the same period, Skanderbeg had launched a dusk hit-and-run raid on the Ottoman camp, killing hundreds of the invaders and destroying their supplies. This vicious cycle of failed assaults and surprise Albanian ambushes lasted for many months, as the Turkish army made little progress in capturing Kruja. Attempts to mine underneath the fortress had also failed due to
I'm just gonna say something really silly, but do you see those guys here in the corner? They look like they're wearing Santa's hats. I know it's not Santa's hat, but it just looks to me like the first thought came to mind.
the fact that the fortress lay on top of a steep and rocky mountainous ridge. As summer turned into fall, the situation became dire in the Ottoman camp. Much of the local countryside had already been burnt before their arrival, and what wasn't had been thoroughly pillaged during the summer season. Running out of
That's what it is, isn't it? And I was just wondering because just like 2 years before he had 40,000 on that Battle of Kosovo. And obviously some of them died. And then they have to go back and things like that. Where all those people were coming from? All those fighters. Like here and he have between 20 and 40,000. So I just...
supplies, sustaining large numbers of casualties, and lastly the weather now turning cold, Murad decided to lift the siege and head back home. During the retreat back to Adana, the Turkish army again faced numerous ambushes by local bands of Albanian peasants, suffering heavy casualties.
But I guess
The
the
6-month
cold weather,
military expedition for
Santa's hat would
Kruja
be very
had
handy.
failed disastrously. While the Albanians only sustained around 1,000 casualties during the course of the siege, Ottoman casualties amounted to almost half the army. As fate had it, this was to be the last military campaign that Murad would undertake. A few months after returning to the capital, the Ottoman Sultan suffered a stroke and died a few days later at the age of 46.
46?
Having ruled the state for almost 27 years throughout 2 reigns, Sultan Murad...
I'm sorry, he was 46 when he died and he ruled for 27 years. He was 13 when he took over? Oh, actually, I shouldn't be surprised because I remember last time I was talking about it too. And it's kind of crazy thinking that now we think about someone who is in their like 21, 22, thinking about all the kids, they're not fully adult, things like that. And then if you look in the history, we had literal kids ruling countries and nations and going into war and going into battles and stuff like that. So why do we start changing our perception of people in their 20s when a lot of other people in their 20s already have full-fledged families and stuff?
The second was to be remembered as one of the most successful Ottoman rulers in history. By the end of his tenure, the Ottoman state had recovered entirely from the disastrous effects of the Battle of Ankara.
Dying at 46.
Moreover, aside from Orhan
I'm
Çelebi
not
and
far from it,
Constantinople,
that's
the
why
House
I'm
of
so
Osman was firmly
outraged.
united under one flag and one sultan. The sultan had also won countless military victories in both Asia and Europe. The Eastern Romans had again been brought to heel, Thessalonica and large parts of Anatolia were reconquered, wars against Serbia and Wallachia were won, and 3 major invading Crusader armies from Europe were defeated. In addition to being a brilliant military leader, Murad II was a patron of the arts, and often indulged himself with scholarship, poetry, and music during his free time. He promoted the usage of the written Turkish language within the royal court, and translated many Arabic and Persian literary works into Turkish. The first Ottoman histories, as well as the histories of the Kayid tribe and the Seljuk sultans of old, were also written during this period. Lastly, the Sultan also opened the famous Enderun school in his capital as a means to establish an educated class of men for the service of the state in the future. Its students were mainly of Divshirme origin, and such subject materials included science, mathematics, geography, art, religion, literature, and physical education. Sultan Murad II's death was celebrated all across Christian Europe, as the mighty ruler left his throne to his untested and already once overthrown son Shahzada Mehmed. However, little did the rulers of Christendom know that a brand new golden age for the Ottoman Sultanate was just around the corner. Murad
keyboard has stopped working. Okay, so oh my son, sultans are like those who hold a sail in their hands, yet the true sultan is the one who holds the scale justly, not the sail, scale. Sorry guys. Let me start that again, okay? Oh my son, sultans are like those who hold a scale in their hands, yet the true sultan is the one who holds the scale justly. When you became sultan, I advise you to hold the scale with justice. Murad II to his heir Mehmed II. Yeah, so like I was start saying, he sounded like just and wise ruler. Obviously, he was going on fights and stuff like that, and wars and things, but who haven't back then? Like,
had laid the foundations for his state to one day become an empire stretching over 3 continents. In the next episode of our series on the early history of the Ottomans, we will conclude the first season of our narrative with one of the most pivotal events in world history, the thrilling Siege of Constantinople. To make sure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next.
Okay, so basically, I just wonder, how many, is it just one more left of this playlist? Let me just see here now. I don't think it is. I thought there was more than that. But we're just gonna check in a second here. Where did it go? There shouldn't go. Okay, so no, we have another 1, 2, 3, 4. No. Oh, this is the next one is very, very long, 51. So I might need to actually do it in parts. And we keep going. Actually, there's another one added to it. Interestingly. There's one that's 6 hours long, and someone did said in comments months ago that basically this is whole of them together. So what I can do next time, I might watch the fall of Constantinople in 1453 in 2 parts, I believe. And then what we're gonna do, we might just keep going, because it's actually one is from 13 days ago, so they keep going. Okay. Ottoman history. I can just be going. Yay. So, yeah, I'm kind of sad that the Murad died, but well, that's what happens, isn't it? Did they said why he died though? What was the reason? So he died in Edirne in Turkey in age of 46. But what was the reason? Second death reason, let's see. So the AI overview says Murad's second death was a result of his abdication in 1444, not an actual death. Doesn't make sense, but okay. And then we keep reading where he had abdicated the throne due to depression over the death of his son and retreated to Manisa. Later he returned to the throne, but eventually died peacefully in 1451. Abdication and second... Okay, so he fell ill. Okay. So at least he died peacefully. I don't know if that would be something that he wanted. He could be one of those rulers that he wanted to die in. I don't know, actually, looking at the fact that he did abdicated and he went kind of like into, you know, like study the poetry and study, and he was doing a lot of into arts and science, and I think he was in general quite peaceful person, and he kind of got, you know, like he had to fight when he had to fight, because obviously you can't really rule a massive country without sometimes going into some conflict. So I think that basically he was the man that he would rather die in peace in his bed. I think I would like that for him. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you in with another one in 2 weeks time, and tomorrow with the usual stuff. So bye.